Crypto is a hot subject, but underpinning technology is quite pivotal too. Tokenization is one of the benefits towards the blockchain technologies. Our next panel dwells on tokenization by looking into social impact of it. The panel has Daniel Coheur from Tokeny, Sergey Ivliev from Vlinder, and Milivoje Batista from Atrom.
Hello everyone, I'm very happy to be there today with you. We have an interesting panel today about talking about tokens and the future of tokens and how this will change the world of finance. So I will start by introducing myself. I'm Daniel Coheur. I'm one of the co-founder of Tokeny, Luxembourg-based startups that provide solutions to create digital representation of financial instruments, so-called token, for the lack of a better word. We are a team of 32 people based in Luxembourg and Barcelona. And we now have, since June last year, Euronext is one of our reference shareholder. We have been building close to 50 customers in the last 2 years. We have brought around 27 billion assets on the blockchain, and we have a strong pipeline in the fund industry, in the private equity industry that we are busy implementing now. I will now give the word to my fellow colleagues.
Hi, so it's my turn now. I'm Sergey. I'm the founder and the director of the company project called Vlinder, which is an impact tech platform we're building to democratize the voluntary carbon market in Europe and globally. And we heavily rely on the tokenization to kind of provide the access to such illiquid instruments as carbon credits, as well as the kind of participation in the future carbon projects. And previously I worked for Lykke, a Swiss crypto finance startup, where we built one of the first decentralized exchanges in 2015 and made our first security token offerings in 2016. It was quite an interesting journey, which I'll have to share the insights from.
Good, and I will use the opportunity to as well introduce myself. My name is Milivoje Batista. I'm working since several years in the field of data protection and privacy. Went, like my colleagues here, to similar developments, building and working on other projects, and today try to combine all the learnings and all the findings in a new platform which calls Atrom. It's an environment which we are especially building for students. Try to take care for the post-pandemic requirements, introducing the platform to connect students and the industry in that, and the tokenization form is on our side less on assets and goes more in the certification process for diplomas, quality certifications, etc. for the industry. So, and I'm participating here in this panel to learn and to share with my colleagues. And yeah, I'm very grateful being able to be here and get this opportunity to share my thoughts on this new process which we all face into. So love to give it back to Daniel and once again, thank you for the invitation. Hi.
So maybe Sergey, can you share a little bit with us how you've been involved with tokens and how you see now this market evolving for the last couple of months, and maybe share some of the use cases you've been working on?
Well, this should be a long answer. So actually, we started like 5 years ago, which it was far smaller phenomenon, and there was just a few ICOs on the market, but it was just initial coin offering kind of events where people actually launched the new cryptocurrencies as a fork, or maybe just the new cryptocurrencies on separate blockchain. And there wasn't yet an Ethereum kind of popular as much as it's now, and we considered to build an exchange. I think the vision was that everything is going to be eventually tokenized, so you will have those kind of digital representations of the ownership on the blockchain for different assets, like globally, whether it is, securities or some kind of loyalty points or anything which will be then eventually tokenized. And there was this vision that, okay, let's build a decentralized exchange which would create a price discovery for those tokens, which is essentially a very important part of the puzzle, right? How to value those. And when we started Licky, there was the idea that let's tokenize the equity of the company. And there was no kind of previous experiments like this, no like blueprints. So we decided, let's go for some token representation, and we chose actually not Ethereum, but Bitcoin blockchain. So Ethereum was still experimental, like beta version. So we started with Bitcoin color coins. There was some protocols which essentially allowed to put some metadata on the Bitcoin blockchain of the assets being tokenized. And we put information that, okay, this piece of the Bitcoin gives the entitlement of the holder to some dividends of the company called Licky AG in Switzerland, and also give the holder some rights to vote for the annual report on the annual coin holder meeting. And like we issued the kind of a memorandum, like, so it wasn't fully a prospectus, but kind of informational memorandum, and issued the coins which corresponds to the equity of the Swiss company. And as this was a kind of a revolutionary thing because ultimately we did the initial offering, and people who bought those coins, they turned out to be also the users of the Licky exchange, of the Licky wallet, and they were one of the most loyal users. So so we basically kind of created an equity token, but also a loyalty point, but also some kind of a governance token. So all in once, and that was pretty revolutionary. And now we think we've seen a lot of like a roller coaster ride in the ICO space, the initial token offerings. It was a massive, I call it bubble. So it was lots of good and bad projects came to the market. I think ultimately it was like around 26 billion probably in total, total value of the ICOs on the market. And then the markets tried to find its way through. So there was the next generation was the initial exchange offering, then some attempts to the security tokens offering to actually make it a mainstream way of raising money. And I think we're still in experimental phase, so there is not yet a kind of I think final solution which suits everybody. I think we'll talk about this. We can talk about the challenges in this session. And now I still think it's a great invention, and lots of possibilities lies within those tokenization.
Maybe if I can share what we've seen and maybe to put things in perspective. We started obviously delivering a solution to enable the support of the utility token, the issuance and the investment in utility token. Obviously, utility token were all about creating communities. The utility in its definition was supposed to be the token you were going to use on the product that was going to be delivered. And since you had people that were originally part of that community having Bitcoin, that for most of them they didn't vote, right? They were part of the early miners, or they received Bitcoins, and for them it was really a way to reward the community to invest in those decentralized projects. Of course, after a short period of time, all those decentralized projects were done. So investors were not so keen to invest in traditional projects that were not using the blockchain. Plus, there was a rally in the Bitcoin and Ether, and we had people that did not mind those coins, but that really bought those coins that become then investors. And they were more careful because they usually use fiat to convert into those cryptos. So they were more cautious in order to invest into those projects. So this expectation that STO would be the future of ICO did not really materialize, again, because people were more careful in what to invest, and because all those centralized projects were done. So we were going back to the fundamental of finance, which is a good project will raise money and a bad project will not raise money. Plus, obviously, since it was clear now that if we were talking about securities, there were financial instruments, and financial instruments had to be regulated. So you had to start. We saw a lot of regulators that started to give a position statement on what those tokens were, and if they were security, then you had to comply with security law. So you had to either fill for prospectus or fall under a prospectus exemption, but you have to follow the rules, meaning you had to perform KYC, you needed to check the eligibility criteria, and there was a need then to have a technology that was enforcing those rules. And this is how at Tokeny we started developing this T-Rex protocol, which was just about replacing a transfer function of a ERC20 token with our solution, which was nothing but a set of smart contracts that were making sure that if there are rules applying to that financial instrument, those rules were enforced at issuance, but also during transfer and redemption. And this is more or less how we started to be more and more involved into this. Milivoje, do you want to share your experience dealing with tokens as well?
Yeah, I can. When I listen to you both, it's like getting back in time, because I think everybody went through the same process, more or less. I mean, it's like we are all living in different countries, but it doesn't matter that everybody went through the same process, just a little bit different explained here. I remember very well when we started as well in this process, and we were talking about tokens. I mean, tokens is not something new created. I mean, MasterCard, these are using tokens, are in their processes, in their technical process since years, participating in the financial business. So I remember very well when we had like 3 or 4 groups working on a project, and everybody spoke about the token and the tokenization process. And we found after 3 or 4 weeks that there was a complete different understanding of what the token is, and what it should be able to do. So like everybody had like a slightly different interpretation of the functionality of a token, That's why I had to laugh a little bit when Sergey was telling us, the first steps in this process and finding out what that really means. And even going back to that, the same process we had, as you guys, I'm sure you remember, we had with blockchain the same, I mean, before it was named blockchain, everybody had his own words for that. And when I listen now to you and go back to all that, which we had this ICO and STO and all the processes, I don't really have much to add to it, because it was pretty much the same on our side, It's like going through all that, finding, searching possibilities to build up a community, to try to give them different use cases and to attract people using your platform and using your services, and which we today know that it was a good start. It was a phase in which they're working, but the whole thing is evolving and changing so fast in the industry that you have to be very creative and innovative to use the same product every 3 to 6 months in a new way to get the attention of the people actually using it, And yeah, in this point, I can just agree with both of you, and it's very easy for me to follow up where you went through.
So going forward, obviously there are 2 main questions. One is related to regulation, the other one is relating to technology. On the technology side, I guess that everyone will come with his own sensibility. We're using, for example, public Ethereum, but others will say that they prefer to use Tezos or Hyperledger or Corda. So I will leave that obviously to everyone to decide what technology best fits they need. But from a regulation perspective, obviously the regulation is something that is not about sensibility. It's about making sure that you have a framework to operate. So Sergey, what do you see from your side? I know that Switzerland has been voting or implementing this new regulation last week, I believe. So can you maybe comment on that and what type of opportunity can represent now for you?
Yeah, actually, this is a great question. So we've been following the regulation for those years, and I think it's now finally been emerging in Europe and particularly in Switzerland. So some are trying to basically do just a bit change the civil codes and the other laws to fit into to describe those opportunities which tokenization can give. And for me, one of the most fruitful direction would be to a bit create a good environment for trading, like for secondary market of those DLT securities, so-called, which are natively issued on the blockchain. And so there is no depository which kind of is the issue, like issuance is this, which basically creates the securities. So you can start and issue the tokens which represent the securities directly on the blockchain. And also, why not to give it a regulatory wrapper to trade those tokens as well on the blockchain, to give the settlement function to the blockchain, which I think would be the great progress, because ultimately this is where the things are going. So the blockchains are, they have fast finality, so it's much faster than the settlement time on the financial markets. This gives you the many opportunities actually that the tokens ultimately can have like multiple functions in one. So it can be security on one side to give you some like ownership rights or some voting rights, but then because it's fast finality, you can have some kind of a payment feature. So you can pay with the token and like transfer it on the blockchain, just convert, maybe you can maybe pay with your shares for your coffee, right? Ultimately, this is the dream. So on the fly, the tokens will be converted and settled on the blockchain, delivered to the owner of the cafe. And in Switzerland, I think it's moving fast. So if it's going to be adopted in mid next year, there will be possibilities actually to issue and potentially trade, have some special license for trading of those DLT securities. We also following there are some other jurisdictions like Liechtenstein, which we closely follow for our own projects to issue the tokens there, both the securities and tokens, and have some legal opinion on these utility tokens as well. I think they are kind of the ones which are the most advanced now in this part.
I guess maybe it is worth sharing to our audience that if you deal with financial instrument, you have to respect the rules applied to financial instruments. What we have seen in the different changes that regulators have brought is to recognize the blockchain as an infrastructure, to maintain registry, to allow transfer, and of course, to issue natively those securities on the blockchain. Financial instruments are already dematerialized. This is nothing new, right? We don't have physical paper anymore representing our shares. Here it's just about dematerializing those financial instruments on a different infrastructure. So you need a framework for doing that, for recognizing, for example, that a transfer that is taking place on the blockchain is a valid transfer, and the ownership is truly transfer. But rules and regulation applying to the financial instrument has to be respected. If you do a public placement, for example, you need to have a prospectus. And if you don't have a prospectus, you have to do that under a specific exemption, or you have to do a private placement and sell that to qualified investors. You have to check, of course, the distribution criteria and the eligibility criteria. So you need to have a solution that enables to enforce that and control that. Otherwise, you may as well just cross the law and expose yourself, as what we've seen, for example, in the US. So it is important to understand that financial instruments are regulated, and you need to follow regulation. Milivoje, what can you basically comment on that perspective from that end, being also in Switzerland?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to be in Switzerland because Switzerland, especially the crypto valley, I mean, well, if the name is now good chosen or not is another thing. But the government, after some hesitation in the beginning, they really started to support, and our financial market authority is really active in that, and yeah, the approach is right. I really agree with you when you say that, we have to regulate it, because if we do not regulate, we do not have clear structures and frameworks where we know we are able to move into. We will face problems after problems. And the thing is that everybody has, once again, this technology field is everybody has his own interpretation of things which he understands it's regulated or is a good regulation or a bad regulation. Basically, what the issue here in the crypto or technology field we have at the moment is that there are basically two groups. This is a group who want to facilitate the day-to-day business with available technology and use this available technology to reduce costs and achieve their goals faster. And there is another group which says, no, this whole crypto and this whole blockchain industry, the idea where they came, if we go philosophically back to Bitcoin, is about to change, to disrupt the whole system, And so I think the first definition is you need to know on which side you stand, to be able to answer if you're happy with the regulation or not, If it depends on which side you stand, you are definitely not so happy. If you want to have a free mind and use the money with the way you want to make money and pay and not going for tax and everything, I'm sure you're not so happy about that, what happens. But if you want to pay salaries and being able to do long-term predictions and organize your business and make sure that everything works on a long term, then I have to say I think it's the best thing could happen to the industry to have a very clear outline where we are able to go with that, what we are doing.
I agree. I totally agree. I think that we should also keep in mind that if rules and regulation exist, is to protect investors. I mean, if we ask issuers to do a prospectus, for example, is in order to provide enough detail for the investor to decide whether this is a good investment for them or not. And in the absence of such a prospectus, well, we are basically asking those projects to be aiming only at qualified investors. By definition, qualified investors are people that are supposedly enough knowledgeable in order to decide whether this is a good investment for them or not. Similarly, if we use people to ask people, to use a custodian, is to guarantee the integrity of the asset, so that basically you cannot lose your asset, as it has been the case with Bitcoin, right? If you now we ask people to use digital custody solution, is to make sure that you don't have to end up on a pile of dirt again looking for the private key that was on the computer because you lost your computer. So there is always a good reason behind that. Now, what do you see as a potential opportunity to create mass adoption with tokens? Sergey, do you have any idea on that, how you could accelerate this market?
I think it's already happening with those institutions and even countries who already have a power to kind of to put some solutions in place. Like, for example, look at the CBDC, right? The central bank digital currencies. Like in China, they already launching the digital yuan. Like, it will be airdrop to all the Shenzhen, citizens, and ultimately in 2 years could be used for the Winter Olympics if it could take place in the COVID world. So this is a blockchain-based solution, which is pretty centralized anyway, because it's a government solution, government blockchain, but it's have some properties of the kind of tokens, right? So basically you have the fiat, which is a token representing one RMB, one Chinese, one digital yuan. Same for the, let's say, on the company level, it could be some global holdings who are launching some tokenization programs for loyalties, or for some global, unifying some multiple loyalty programs in one. There was an example in Lique where we worked with EMAR, which launched the loyalty program, which will kind of replace their existing 200 programs they have for different hotels and different malls that they own, to have one token which is kind of adopted and which will be issued on Ethereum, but also have some kind of a private layer, like a side chain for the fast transaction, for kind of fast and cheap. And this is happening. But I'm personally big believer on the public solutions, permissionless. I think this is where the biggest innovation is, like where we see those different decentralized autonomous organizations appear, which have their own, there's no legal ground, there's no company behind. It's just a group of this community of people who have the same rules of kind of doing things, and they use this token basically to vote and govern their organization. And there is, I think, this going really forward is going to be the biggest upside here in this space.
Okay. What we do see as well from our side is that, there is really a difference between public market and private market, right? In private market, there are many opportunities, but you need a secondary market. So not a secondary market as you would see for public instrument, where you want instant liquidity, but a secondary market where you can reduce your illiquidity costs. Because when you have a private instrument, obviously, and there are many opportunities to invest in private instrument. We recently have been working with a company that was doing forestry. You could invest in the forest, which is a great, actually, ESG product, but you had to commit to 18 years. And obviously for a pension fund, it's not a problem to commit to 18 years, but as an individual, right, you never know what the future will be made of. Especially now, if you look what's happening with COVID, you may have a need for liquidity in a coming month, or simply because obviously your source of income has been reduced, impacted by what's happening now. So you need to have a way to have access to some form of secondary markets. So, but this is not in the definition that people see of very liquid market. It's simply addressing this illiquidity cost. But obviously, to get there, you need first to digitalize, so to tokenize those assets. So what we see is probably the biggest need now is for bringing solution in order to create those digital representation of those assets. So, and obviously, when we're talking with compliance officer, are probably the most important person in the company, even before the CEO. If a compliance officer say no, then nobody's moving, right? So you need to remove all the barrier of entry for a compliance officer to say, yes, let's go. And when they look at regulation or technology, say, oh, there's too many risks, we don't want to move forward. So recently what we've been doing is we've been tokenizing assets by just creating a mirroring of the original assets. The mirroring does not oblige you to change anything in the supporting information, prospectus or documentation, because this is just a mirror of the assets. Plus, you don't have to make a technology decision, because obviously we create the mirroring of public Ethereum. But if tomorrow Coheur or Hyperledger would be the main blockchain being used, we could burn those tokens and replicate them on a different blockchain. So the mirroring is a good way to create digital representation of those assets that you can then use in order to enter an instruction to sell on those secondary markets. So we see that as a perfect way, in a way, to grow hack this industry by digitalizing those financial instruments, which also bring the benefit of having a digital environment for you to interact with your investors or with your issuers. Milivoje, do you see that kind of opportunity in the business that you do in education, for instance?
And I see a lot of opportunities with that. I mean, the mass adoption on my side, as far as I understand, is either you take. I mean, there are two ways. If you're either you're promoting your token and try to put the token on top of it, or you're putting your service on top of it. I mean, that a lot of time when I listen to this conversation, I see it will be the same like telling the people, "I'll use your credit card, but buy token before." You know, and when you have your token, then you use your token to make your credit card function. Well, which is not the case. I just put the credit card in the ATM or in the POS and use it and pay with it, you know. So taking the token in a first level down from where the industry is putting it as the all possible instrument to create the money to operate the business. I think this will lead us nowhere. We really should make the services we are providing by the name, and this way give a popularity to the instrument we are using, you know. And I think this way we will overcome the struggles, because with what we are fighting is not the opportunities are given. There's so many things we can do with tokens and so many possibilities. It goes much faster. It's secure. I know when I receive the title from your company, when I buy by Tokeny, I buy a certificate, I know it's mine. So there's a huge add value. Before it was like, there was a 20% probability that the assets I'm buying was not actually mine, because there was no, the proof of evidence was much longer and more complicated. But we walked away from the services we are providing to making the token the hero and making the people just thinking about the token. Buy this token, look at the performance of the token, look at the percentage where it goes, token, that then the people forget why we are using this token. This is just an instrument. And the moment we take him down and focus and promote again the services we are providing for the good of humanity, you know, from the technological standpoint of view, from a real humanitarian standpoint of view, from many standpoint of views, you know, we will see a higher increase in acceptance in the population of that. Then that what we ask now the people, if I come back to your basic question, you know, it's like, oh, trust the token again after all that what happened the last 6-7 years. You know, that's what I see. And
Okay.
this is my opinion.
So I think we just have a couple of minutes left. So as a word of conclusion, I'm going to ask both of you to give us your prediction. Where is this market will be in 5 years from now?
Oh, and in 5 years from now, this is a tough question because the market is moving very, very fast. I see the banks are jumping on it. I mean, after stopping the whole process for years to bring themselves in position, they're jumping on it. The central banks are issuing their digital token. I think that in 5 years from now, we have a 70 to 80% fully tokenized society in the sense of title transfers, value transfers, and even, I would say, even money, that the cash positions, the way it goes forward now, will reduce almost to zero. It will never be zero, but it will really tremendously go down. That's where I see the market in 5 years.
Sergey, what is your take?
I think it will be conservative to say it actually is going to be at least $1 trillion worth of the market cap of the tokens, which are kind of publicly traded. And there will be native solutions built on like any smartphones. It's already happening with the flagship smartphones, but it will be on every smartphone in 5 years. The next generation of the actually kids will be just digitally like native, and they will use those tokens in games, and this is so like they're so fluent with this technologies. I think there will be major kind of issuers will go like issuing DLT securities on like maybe a couple of IPOs will be done like of some like tier 1 companies on blockchain. And yeah, I think the inclusion will grow dramatically. Like what you get with this tokenization, if you have the proper legal construct, you can have much like great inclusion of those who are now financially unbanked or like in like third world countries. This will happen, and this is the hope.
So from my perspective, I thought that I think that everybody was expecting a revolution when we saw the Bitcoin coming up, the ICO and STOs. Now, obviously, everybody recognize now that this is more an evolution than a revolution. But I do believe that in a couple of years from now, we will not talk about this anymore. Why? Because everybody will use it, but we will stop using those acronyms, STOs, ICOs. It will be part of our everyday life. As much as today, email is something we use without thinking of what is the technology behind. It was not a revolution. Email, started to enter in our life, and now we wouldn't think of working without emails. And I'm pretty sure it will be the same thing about, blockchain and tokens. We'll not use the word tokens anymore. There will probably be other words, or we'll talk about securities, but everybody will be using that, and it will become part of our daily life. And we'll see the benefit from that technology because it will reduce the cost of issuance. It will improve the transfer. It will make this industry more cost effective. And of course, there will be newcomers, new services that will leverage all the possibility that this technology will offer. That's at least my take. Having said that, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure sharing this panel with you today. To the audience, thank you very much for listening to us. We hope that you have enjoyed the session and that we have been sharing information that you will find valuable for your own future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure meeting you again.